Hi, folks. How's it going? Hope you had a restful weekend. Um, as a reminder, we're recording today's Zoom. Please pull up your learning management system to follow along, um, and get ready to use a lot of emoji reactions because I'm facilitating today. Today's question of the day is, what is one item that you put on that you put on your to-do list this morning, and what resources do you need to get that done?
Hmm.
And I'm going to ask Erin to start us off.
Oh, great. Well, on my to-do list this morning was to go swimming with my son, and we went. I needed a car to get there. I needed like my membership to go there. And yeah, those are the main things. And him. I will popcorn over to Nels.
This morning I had a 2 month checkup for my 2 month old. I was about to say 8 week old, which is the same thing. And in order to do that, I needed a lot of things. I needed diapers, a bottle, a to-go bag, a car seat, a car, making sure that I was on time to get there soon enough. Yeah, so that was my big task for this morning, and there were a lot of little pieces that needed to happen to make it happen, but we did it. I'm gonna pass it over um to Dave.
Um, I'll keep it simple. My task I had was to catch up on some emails this morning, so I needed some time and to prioritize which emails I was going to respond to. Pretty boring, but it was true. Um, Tracy,
Oh, thanks, Jay. I had to get some invoices together to submit for a reimbursement to NIFWIF, and I had to get with the bookkeeper to make sure that all the numbers jived. And I will go to Sarah.
First thing on my list this morning was laundry, and we don't have a dryer. So the things that I need are a weather report for the clothesline, and washing machine, and a cooperative toddler. Um, Alfredo.
Hey, so one to-do list was to I had to pass a lawnmower trimmer for the patio, and I needed gas and oil, and so I had gas, but I didn't have oil, so the grass still growing. It's been a rainy day. I'll I'll pass to think Margaret.
Hello. Gosh, it's a busy Monday. My husband is out of town, which is new because he usually is not out of town. So I had to manage this dog situation. So getting them out walking and coordinating for early morning tomorrow. And so I've made a couple of connections to make sure that things will work for both him out of town. It's a little bit unexciting. How about Soul?
Thanks, Margaret. Sarah kind of took mine. I was also going to say laundry. Um, and I guess spin on mine. Like I needed my own time. I needed to collect my dirty clothes. I also needed a working washing machine, which I've discovered this morning I do not have anymore. So I also need maintenance, and there's a plumber working on it right now. But um, not to be too, you know, hitting it over the head with like the connection to the lesson we're gonna talk about today, activities lists, but um, thinking about kind of maintenance and sustainability of like the tasks and the programs we're developing, and what activities and inputs we might need for when things go wrong is something we'll chat about later today as well. Um, okay, I will popcorn it to Sam.
All right. That was hitting it over the head, but that's okay. It was all relevant. Um, I had on my thing, my to-do list to sign some documents for a mortgage I'm getting, and I needed somebody to send me those documents. And it's all very time constrained, and they did not send them to me. So I needed somebody from the outside to do what they said they were going to do, and they didn't. So that's also, like Alfredo's, staying on the list for tomorrow with my fingers crossed. And I'm going to pass it to Kat.
Hey, all. Tomorrow, the first thing I have to do is renew. It's a certain type of document that you need in Cambodia to work here. It's called an employment card. So it's a little thing you have to flash to show that you actually work here versus being a tourist. And my partner's is very expired, and we realized we're in trouble. So we have to go to the office. So we need some bribe money, unfortunately. As part of that, we need our bicycles. We need a snack because it's 95 degrees over here. So I need a little bit of water and snack to get us on the way there. And I need two good excuses to try to bring to the military there when we go there. So we're gonna try to figure that out. Um, I'll pass it over to I think Nicole. I don't know if you've gone yet.
No, I haven't. I would say my goal for this morning was to write a Substack post, which I'm diving into this new social media thing, which is pretty fun. So I needed to have the time to do it. I needed to have a computer to type on, and I needed an idea for what to write about, and I need some knowledge about how to use this new technology platform. And I just wanted to say, what a beautiful celebration of Puerto Rican culture the Super Bowl was. The Benito Bowl yesterday, Alfredo was so cool. So I just wanted to mention that. And I will pass to Katie.
Yeah, I second that, Nicole. And as a Seattleite, that was pretty. It was an uneventful game, but it was still great to watch. Um, so my 50th birthday is next month, and I'm gonna have a very large party, and at the cajoling of my mother and my partner. So my job right now is, as of this morning, was to gather emails and start the Evite. So I guess I needed a computer and a phone so I can text people and ask them what their emails are if I don't have them. Um, Maite, have you gone? No? Okay. I popcorn to her.
I don't think the microphone is working, Maite. I don't hear you.
Oh, poor Maite. Her mic is never working.
Yeah. How do you do the emojis in the chat, by the way?
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, now we can. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'm sorry. One thing I added on my to-do list was testing out a new keyboard for my desk, and it's just been sitting there for a week. I just haven't done that task. So I put it in this morning to do it by the end of today, hoping to get to that. And I'll popcorn. I'm not sure who's next, who hasn't gone. Margaret?
Oh, I did go doing
Okay.
stuff with my dog.
Alfredo?
No.
I
Do I think
Nels?
think it might
Yeah.
just be me.
Haley, yeah.
Is anyone
okay.
not me gone? Oh, Hannah. I think I might
Go
be the
ahead,
end of the
Lynn.
popcorn chain. My to-do list, the first thing I wrote was reply to an editor with a proposal for this piece. In order to do that, I need about an hour to get my ducks in a row as far as who I would interview for this piece and write a timeline that would make sense for their publication. So time and thought and a walk in the rain to gather my thoughts.
I love that. Um, Time in the rain, especially. I love that. All right. Well, I think everyone, we with our question this morning or this afternoon or whatever for you, we kind of preempted the lesson that we're going to get into today, which is about activities, lists, and inputs. But as usual, before jumping into today's agenda and objectives, we're going to do a little lesson reflection on what happened last week. I'm going to hand that off to Erin because I was not here for the last lesson, and then we'll get to it.
Thank you. Any quick takeaways from our evaluation session from Wednesday?
Yeah, the
I
importance
think
of
this
keeping
was
it
the hardest
simple.
one for me so far. And I think it was primarily because when we were writing the measures, no, when we were writing, it was the first two columns. So that would have been outputs and then outcome measures. It was like, if I'm looking at ours from last time, the output was like one NGO determination letter. And then the outcome measure is just partners willing to support. It just felt like it was just rewording a, the same thing, I guess, if I can say it like that.
Okay. Yep. Some a little bit of ambiguity sometimes that you have to kind of think through as you're. This is not just a rote thing where everything's exactly the same. And one thing we kind of highlighted last time is that you all are going through the right steps and thinking about how you approach creating, for example, an evaluation plan. Alfredo, you were going to say something?
Yeah, like the importance of keeping it simple, keeping it clear definitions, thinking always on the audience, funders' interests, definitions, RFP, having all that in mind, and the importance of visualizing it through the evaluation plan.
Yes, it's all connected. And you have to think from multiple different perspectives. You have to think from your organization and what you want to do and what the funder is expecting of you for when you get to that point. Any other final thoughts?
One thought when my boss and I met was just how some of the work that we've done to date, we have not been evaluating properly. It was more of a retrospective task for us in realizing that in the past we might have been able to do things a lot better had we used this framework. And then it just, also caused us to kind of look at some of our partners and where we work together and who's kind of capturing like that value or like where are things that we're doing specifically ours and our organization related, where are they joint and where are they separate and how that can kind of all get lost in the sauce.
Great. Yes, well, I'm glad to hear that you're looking at things through a new lens. I think that's one thing that's always helpful about working with new people and learning about different ways of doing things, different approaches. Did everyone do their homework? Watch the Bart Simpson snippet? And can I ask if anyone wants to jump in and tell me anything that resonated with you? Okay, there's a metaphor. I'm wondering if anyone picked up on it. Katie?
Oh, I was just itching my ear, but I will I will
I know you
definitely
are.
say I loved it. I thought it was such a perfect it's exactly what so many teachers experience in classrooms where the kids are frustrated and then all of a sudden they get it and it's like, yay, they're doing it. So I thought it was
And
great.
can you imagine being in France and finding out that someone is putting formaldehyde in the wine?
No.
Who cares about the kids, right?
Incredible.
That was
So,
I was gonna say that was my takeaway where it was like to your knowing your audience, right? So it was like when he did learn French and he started speaking, the guy really didn't care about the kid. He was like, "Oh my God, the wine."
right.
So
Yeah.
if we didn't mention
Yeah.
that, he might would have not cared.
Yeah, I don't know if that was intentional on Bart's part, but it was definitely fortuitous. So, yeah, obviously it was just a fun thing, but I think it's always helpful to take a step back and reflect on where you're going, whatever you're doing in your work, personal life, relationships, and just recognize the fact that when you're learning new things and working with new people and getting new experiences, it doesn't all sink in at once. So our objective is not that you're going to learn and internalize all this stuff. Each session, you're going to be experts on evaluation. The next time, you're going to be an expert on work plan. It happens over time, and some people adapt and adopt these methodologies and principles quicker than others and with more or less effort, and that's all part of the process. And I had a conversation with someone today in our group who was feeling a little frustrated with the fact that it was just the process is a little difficult. It's frustrating because it's not always that it's not always just that it's taking maybe longer than you hope to learn something. You may not be in the right place in your life or with your organization's development to act on some of these things. Like your organization may not be at a point where you're developing a program, or you want to develop a program, or you have to write a grant for something. You're like, oh, I can apply this right away. You might look at this and be like, now I know how to think about this stuff, and I know how to visualize a couple of years down the road and kind of work backwards and figure out how to design a program and how to write a grant, but I'm not really at that point yet. And it's important to recognize that. And that's okay. We're not trying to force you to come away with us with a work product that doesn't work for you. If you're in the situation where this is just a pure learning experience because there's nothing that directly relates to your current work, that's okay, because very soon there will be, and you'll be very well positioned to act on those opportunities because you've had this experience and you've gained these competencies and you have very competent coaches to work with for the next year. So I'm going to hand things back over to Sol. Her and Sam have a very exciting lesson ahead for us.
Thanks, Aaron. I think the point Nell's made was kind of a light bulb moment for me. And I think, we've been talking about why we're moving from right to left on a logic model, and when typically it might make more sense to kind of think about, we have this problem, what are we doing to solve it, and then measure, and then what are the outcomes. I think that idea of are we measuring the right things? Are we doing the right things to address the actual problem that we said we're trying to address? Is the solution actually aligned with the problem? And I think that's, we're going to get into that a little bit more today. So moving from the evaluation plan over to the left side of the logic model, we're going to chat through, inputs and activities lists. We're going to create a preliminary list of activity and resources for the project you've been working on through all these class activities. By the end of this, you'll have a complete draft of a logic model. And then we'll start working from left to right once again as we move into kind of more grant writing sections of the course. So to Aaron's point, it is confusing, it is difficult. Hopefully today is one of those aha moments where coming off of the evaluation plan, it starts to make a little bit more sense. But to that end, we're going to spend, the first half of the session kind of working through the evaluation, the activities list section. We'll chat through some examples, and then Sam will lead us through reviewing kind of types of inputs and resources that can help us make sure that our activities are successful, and identifying kind of what those are for different types of activities. So this will probably be a bit of a recap for most folks, but an activities list is really just outlining the concrete steps that your team is going to take to carry out your proposed solution to a problem. Like we said, it's on the left side of the logic model. It really connects your problem statements, your outcomes, and the resources that you're going to need. And so in a grant application, it's kind of laying out the justification for the budget that you'll eventually write and the work plan that you'll write. And just one quick reminder, before we go into the activity of drafting up activities lists, we want to make sure that we're encompassing in this section of the logic model, not just the core program activities, but also all the support activities that that are required by a grant, that you might need generally to justify your program to funders, etc. So your problem that you might be working on is that there's limited markets for your fishers to sell their catch in. And your main, objective there might be that you want to like start working with a farmer's market, and set up like Sunday fish markets, for example. But to do that, like you also need to do the outreach to get people excited about the Sunday fish market, to know what's happening. You also need to evaluate, particularly if you're getting funding from a grant to pull this off, how many new buyers are you accessing through this market? How many people, found out about the market through your outreach? What are your sales looking like? Like, did this actually work? And so a lot of times, when folks are starting to draft activities lists, they're just focusing on those core program activities. So just a reminder as we move into kind of starting to draft activities lists, to think about those supporting activities, roles, and objectives that will help you kind of get to your outcomes, and also within the context of a grant, that are sometimes literally like required of you in an RFP. Do folks generally feel like comfortable with this concept of an activities list? If so, if you could give me a little emoji react. Does anyone have any questions about kind of the main concept before we move on?
I do a little bit, Sol. So if you're just sort of like using the example that you gave about the fish market,
Mhm.
like how far are you going? Are you saying like this may be like an exaggeration, but like this organization also needs to like file their taxes by April 15th, right? So like that is an activity that you need to do, but it's not like really that related to the fish market or that proposal. So where do those kind of support activities get cut off, I guess?
Yeah, no, great question. I think generally when we're moving into an activities list, you want to keep it high-ish level, get the main categories in there, and then get the like 2 or 3 core like support things that would go there. Also, if you've already designed your outcomes and outputs, kind of think directly like what are the activities that are going to lead to this, output and outcome. As far as administration, like I think it might be a little easier to think in terms of like a grant. Like for a grant, the administration you need is somebody that is doing like the biannual reporting, and somebody that's, putting like liaising with the funder and et cetera. And so those are administrative activities that you capture here. Maybe not so much paying taxes. Um, we'll kind of circle back to this later on when we get to budget, but like the paying taxes thing, particularly for a grant context, is something you would capture under indirect, where like the funder is kind of like, oh, like we know that there's stuff that your organization has to do to kind of keep the lights on to even be able to do this project. And we don't want you detailing that. We're just going to give you some percentage of money to cover that. I think if you think of that, like don't include anything that's like that would fall under that indirect category in your activities list. But do include, like, oh, I do need a staff person that's going to actually write the reports, or I do need, somebody, like I do need somebody that is managing administration of whatever program I'm proposing or designing here. That should go here. Yes, Margaret. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
I was on that same pathway to a dark hole here. And one of the thoughts I had was one of those tasks for the fish market would be making sure I have a payment system. So while it's not taxes, it's not that far down the indirect side, but it is something that actually I need to implement the activity at the farmers market to make sure I have my square or some kind of, so that one would be considered part of the activities to confirm that I've got a payment mechanism or something to support the sales.
I think that would kind of fall into inputs. Like you'll need the payment mechanism as a resource to run the activity of like making sales at the farmers market.
Okay.
Sam, sorry, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I would just say, just like Nels was talking earlier about evaluation, if you don't put evaluation in your activities list, you might not do it, right? And same with administration, like even though it's indirect, some form of writing administration, because it gets you to think that in order to do this, I'm going to have to make sure I do certain things, right? And how detailed do you go down? And we're going to get into that. But the point that Sol is making is that don't just put your programs down, because there's a lot more to it than that. And if you ignore it, you may forget it. And also you'll look as though to a funder, as though you're not considering that. And when you put it in there, they'll say, oh, wow, this is a complete picture. They're thinking of it fully.
In terms of like how much detail, one benchmark is think categories. This is not a to-do list where you're going to list every little thing out you need to do to file your taxes, contact the accountant, collect my paperwork, right? But you might include that big category of file taxes by as an activity, or set up the payment system or something like that. So, and there's
Or like
there's a
manage program.
Right.
Yeah, like I think to Aaron's point, like for this this is a logic model that you're including as a short table for folks to kind of get the high level of what you're doing. But then also that allows you to have some insight and some structure when you then move into developing your budget and work plan. And so, you know, you're not going to include, make sure I remember Stripe as an activity, but you might include like manage the market, or like administer, you know, like administration for the market or whatever. Like think about kind of high level categories and like one step underneath that, like what are the like 3 to 5 kind of high level things that need to happen as a category underneath like your key program objectives, underneath like outreach and engagement, evaluation, administration, etc. It might be helpful to kind of go through one more example before we put y'all in pairs to do this separately. And so to that end, and this might clarify a little bit more kind of like what level of activity goes into the activities list section of the logic model. If we have one brave volunteer who would like to share one project that they're working on, you know, the outcomes that maybe they've generated that they want their program that they're designing to result in. As a group, we thought we could, you know, brainstorm some activities that might support those outcomes. Is there a brave volunteer that would like to share what they're working on? This is like a war of attrition.
No, everyone's going to raise their hand all at once. Watch this.
All right, I'm going to give folks 10 more seconds to volunteer. Otherwise, I'm going to pick somebody at random.
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm showing the outcomes.
You can just tell us an outcome that you're, you know,
tell you
you're
one.
designing
Okay,
you're designing a program for this to get to this outcome.
So one of my intermediate outcomes, the number of deliveries and or the weight of plastic taken to the landfill has decreased by 25% over a 3-year time period. So smart, by the way.
Nice. Okay. Dave, could you tell me an activity that could eventually lead to this outcome?
So, collecting or intercepting plastic for recycling or before it gets to the landfill.
Okay, great. Um, who else in here? Tracy, do you have an activity that could help move us towards this outcome?
I was actually kind of leaning towards what Dave was saying, so no.
Okay. It's fine.
I have one. What about
Okay.
what about establishing a collection site at the transfer station or whatever they call them in Alaska, so that you're intercepting them as they're coming to the dump and you don't have to go get it.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so if we've established the collection site and we have some process to kind of collect the plastic now, uh, how are people finding out about this?
You need some kind of an outreach, some kind of communication strategy.
Great. Okay, so we're doing outreach. What type of outreach are we doing? Are we sending people flyers? Are we knocking on their doors? Are we engaging fishers associations? Like, what outreach activity are we doing or activities?
What about
Is
social
it
media?
for the sake of
Social media.
learning, is it too vague to say like establish a strategic communications plan, or you want to be more detailed with it? Like, that would really depend on who you were trying to reach, and that's like a whole conversation of like what
Yeah,
would
I
be the
think
best outreach.
you're gonna hate my answer, which is it depends. But like, if you're doing program design and you're at the beginning stages of program design, like establishing a communications plan could be an activity. If you're applying for a grant where you have to detail what your expenses are going to be for this category and you don't really know what's going to go in there, you should be very explicit about what those activities are and just generally estimate what the costs might be. So like if I am applying for a grant for this and I have to include outreach, I would say like I'm going to run a digital campaign. I'm going to do I'm going to do a print campaign as well, and I'm going to engage partners. And so then when I'm thinking about the inputs needed, I'm like, okay, like if I'm trying to reach 1,500 people through print, I know how much it costs to print that, and I can include that in the cost. If I'm going to run digital, like I know that I need to have a social media staff person. I'm going to include 0.5 FTE for that in the inputs, which I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves. But like, so again, it
No, that's
depends.
super helpful.
Program design or grant writing. Yeah. Katie.
Cool.
I was gonna say, so let's say you establish a relationship with suppliers where it's sort of like not like a buyback, but like, if they can prove that they took their their nets to net your problem instead of to the transfer station, they get some kind of coupon, like 5% off their next purchase. And so really just developing a partnership, I guess, is the with suppliers is the outreach.
Great.
Yeah,
I
I
also
had
heard.
one. Oops.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was here. I had something that Katie talked quickly about, but you need an alternative for this material. So if it's not going to the landfill, where is it going? Which is a little bit of a compliment to what Katie was saying, like to incentivize people, but in this partnership. But
So it
where
sounds
else
like
would it
maybe
go?
like we're trying to identify like end users and also form relationships with them.
Right.
Okay.
I would highly encourage other people to volunteer for doing this in the future because now you guys are just all doing my work, which is really great.
Okay, so we have a couple core activities here, which is like actually establishing the collection site and then like designing some sort of incentive program. And then we also have some outreach and partnership development that needs to happen. Is there anything in terms of evaluation or administration that's missing here?
I would say I know we have collecting plastic for recycling, but the administrative would be like who is collecting the data is the place that is collecting it taking a tally? Is that something that you need to develop a tool for or you need to develop a plan for? And so I just think the actual data collection of collecting the plastic is an administrative task.
Yeah, that's great. Sam, I see you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're going to get to pretty quickly is once we've done this activities list, the whole outputs thing is going to be a lot easier for you. So while we're saying move right to left on the logic model, the outputs and activities are related. And the big point there is we want you to start with the end in mind. And then if you have to develop the activities and then the outputs, that's okay. But because you're gonna, once you do this work today, you're gonna rethink your outputs and go, oh yeah, this is easy to measure, I think.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think, like we said, we designed this intentionally to move right to left so that you're kind of able to think strategically about how you're building back from a problem. Generally, if you are writing a grant, you might be going problem, outcome, activities, and then inputs and outputs. And so here, it's like, okay, if we're establishing a collection site, an output might be how many collection sites you're establishing. If you're running a digital campaign, how many people are you reaching in the digital campaign? If you're forming partnerships, how many organizations are you engaging in partnerships, right? And so those are outputs, and also could help, with the evaluation plan. So these things are iterative and they kind of all intersect each other. But hopefully this exercise is useful in kind of thinking, okay, like kind of coming off the last lesson, like, are we evaluating the right things that are moving us towards the outcome? And now are we designing the right activities that are moving us towards that outcome? Maybe one more bullet here about administration and evaluation, and then in the interest of time, we can move into doing this in partner groups, so you have some time to think about your own projects.
Maybe
Dave had his,
contracts and training.
Sorry, training?
Yeah, maybe contracts and training.
Like training fishers or training staff people to do the recycling stuff, or what is the training? Or
Yeah,
sorry, I
the
don't.
training needed in order to get those landfill decrease at the end. So just thinking about if any training needs and staff needs to reach that outcome.
Training fishermen to sort their plastic and training staff to receive it.
There you
Okay.
go. And so that brings up a point there. We do think of activities pretty easily as problem solvers. And training is always something we think about, but maybe there's no training needed, right? Like, don't just write training there if you do have stuff that you want to do. And the idea is, again, the reason we start with the right side is because the things that would just come to our mind really quickly because we're used to doing them, we're good at doing them, don't necessarily line up with your outputs and outcomes the way you want them to. And so just make sure that you're passing it through the filter because you've already written the outcomes, because our activities tend to be the things that we like to do or that we're good at or that we've been doing. And that's part of the purpose of this.
The flip side of that is kind of specifically with respects to grant applications. Like, you might be applying for a grant that's more general and you can just include what you think all of these activities you can include. You might be applying for a workforce grant and you're like, well, how could a workforce grant help me deliver less plastic? Well, that's one where you could include all these things and then specifically focus on the training, like what staff across the supply chain like need training to be able to like pull off this reduction in plastic taken to the landfill.
Great.
And so there might be, and then you do have to make a decision of like, does that actually satisfy your strategic vision and goals and etc. Like I keep going back to the example of Margaret, like when she's like, well, like, yeah, like we kind of want people to eat more nutritious food, but like that's not actually what we're about. Like we're not going to be applying to a USDA like nutrition grant. We're actually just trying to expand our market, right? So there is this conversation of like, do the opportunities we're applying for funding with like actually match our strategy? But to the extent that they do, or you are interested in expanding into training or etc., like there is this reconciliation that can happen with the activities list of like, especially if you're applying for funding, like, does this grant sort of meet me halfway in like allowing me to move towards the outcome I want? So something to think about, particularly on the grant side. For program design, that's less relevant. I think Sam's point of like, okay, we're good at this activity, but does it actually advance our strategic vision and our goals and objectives is more relevant there. Sorry, not to confuse y'all.
But
Okay,
Sol,
going.
I want to jump. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in because that's such a brilliant point. And by doing it this way and having this built, it helps you decide very strategically when you make those compromises to say, oh, we're going to apply for this grant, as opposed to just jumping after the money. And so this, her description of, oh, I'll meet the grant halfway, it can be mission creep that takes you away from your original thing, or it can be a very strategic decision to apply for something. And so I thought that was really a great answer, Sol.
Thanks, Sam. Um, I know Sam and I just shared quite a bit. So before we move on, like, do folks have any questions? Do folks have any thoughts about this? Did this generally make sense? You can also give me an emoji react if you don't want to come off speaker and say something. But if you do have a question, please do ask, or if you have a thought that you want to share with the group.
I do have a thought about the evaluation part as an activity, since the outcome is decreasing by 25% over 3 years. Can an activity be like quarterly assessments?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Dave,
I
yep.
kind of had a similar question. So, like, is an activity evaluating the realisticness of your outcome, or is that something that you need to do before? Like, does fishing gear, if you stopped it all, would that decrease 25% of the plastic in landfills, or is it such a small component that it really can't be achieved?
That sounds like a research question. And I
So
think
could that
that would
be
be,
an activity? Or
I
Well,
is
think
that
that should
that's,
just
be done before you write your activity list. In other words, when you're writing your outcomes, and you have to research and think about that before you finalize your logic model, I would say.
or if there's things that are unresolved and they cannot be resolved until the completion of the project, then that gets built into your evaluation plan in the form of a research question, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, to me it sounded like you're asking about kind of right sizing the outcome and right sizing the evaluation.
Right. And the activity.
Yeah, like the activity would follow from having kind of right sized the outcome and evaluation, but your activity would just be like measuring the thing that you said you were going to evaluate. And if you've set a goal that or an outcome that like you don't have the capacity or ability or resources to evaluate, like that's something to sort out when you're setting that outcome and figuring out the evaluation plan. When you get to the activities list, like by that point you should kind of have the evaluation plan sorted out a little bit, and think about like, okay, yeah, what do I need to do for the evaluation to take place? Maybe not so much like, am I like the strategic, like kind of like right sizing and adjusting and etc. That said, if you do have any sort of plan that will be like iterative, you could have, for example, community advisory board meetings as an activity, or you could have like strategic committee meetings or whatever to kind of continue to like take in feedback and adapt your project. Like that is an activity that you would want to include. And oftentimes, grant applications will ask you about how you're doing project governance and how you're making sure that your project is responsive to community feedback or to changes as you do your project. And so that's kind of like one go-to activity you can always include, like community advisory board meetings, strategic plan meetings, partnership meetings, whatever it might be. Okay, so I hope this example was helpful. We are now gonna split out into pairs for 30 minutes and work on kind of doing this exercise in pairs, brainstorming and drafting an activities list for an outcome that you've been working on for the purposes of the course. You're gonna spend 15 minutes on one of your activities lists and 15 minutes on the other. We'll prompt y'all. And we really want y'all to think about if these selected activities explain what you're doing to address the stated problem and carry your solutions, if they align. So, that conversation we were just having about training and et cetera. And again, like the Margaret example of like, we're not a nutrition organization, like this doesn't actually align. And if they cover these kind of support tasks, administration, outreach, evaluation, etc. Katie, yes. You're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I had to push too many buttons. So question. So earlier in the session, we were talking about, say we're not there yet. Like we don't have this, program sort of in mind or developed, and that's maybe a bit of a roadblock for some of these activities. And I'm wondering, is it acceptable or okay to pair with somebody like Nicole, who I feel like has a really strong program developed, to be able to practice these these lessons that you're doing, but maybe I don't necessarily feel like I'm ready to bring my program to this activity. So I don't know if anybody else is in that same space where, like, my organization just isn't, we're not in that space quite yet. And so I don't know.
Yeah, I think for the
Okay.
purposes of the
Let's work
exercise,
together, Katie.
Yeah.
That's fine. We do
I mean, I
want you
wasn't.
kind of like focusing on one activity for 15 minutes, one activity exists for 15 minutes. So you're welcome to either think through like your partner's project for 15 minutes, but you're kind of leading that brainstorming, and then switch over and they're thinking through another outcome. Or you can kind of just come up with something like, oh, like the farmers market example, like we want to expand fishers markets, or we want to expand our organization's like reach, like what activities would do that. Like you can think of a very generic example, but we do want you to actually do the exercise for yourself for 15 minutes. Yeah,
Sure, that's fair. Thanks.
Great. Okay, in the interest of, I'd usually ask somebody to say back to me what they think we're doing and ask any questions, but in the interest of time, we're going to split up into groups, and then Sam, Aaron, Kat, and I might pop in just to see if there's any confusion or anything. But yeah, we're spending the next half hour drafting activities list for outcomes, 15 minutes on one partner, 15 on the next. And then I think Kat just sent us to breakout rooms. Okay, we're back. I heard some great conversations happening in the rooms I popped into about how to like kind of building off evaluation plans and then like structuring activities that really aligned with that, and kind of putting together the information from last session and this session. So hopefully that was useful for folks. Bailey, I see you have your hand up.
I think she just stepped away. Oh, there she's back.
Sorry, friend. That was me plugging in my phone. I'm back. I meant to say
Oh,
be right
no,
back.
no worries. You had your hand up. Did you have something to, or you meant to? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Got it. No problem. Could I have what maybe Sarah share like some activities you came up with or how that went for you?
Yeah. So we didn't work on my like real job project at all, but that's fine. Tracy is trying to broaden the idea of when lobster is a good meal, and the answer to that should be it's always a good meal rather than it's a special occasion or it's a black tie thing. And I coincidentally, Seoul, am trying to also open a fish market at Pier 45 in San Francisco. And so many of the things you said about a fish market were really in line with that. So we mostly spent the time brainstorming on how to convince people that lobster is an everyday, delicious, and accessible protein. So we came up with a bunch of activities, including social media campaign and
Sarah's going to be my influencer.
Yeah, right.
I love
Material
that.
development.
Yeah,
I
I
just have to
think,
send her some lobster.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess one quick kind of takeaway as we transition off from activities lists into now, like, what do we need to make those activities happen? Is that for some of these categories, like, there are some go-to activities you can always think about, right? Like with outreach, like, think about print campaigns, think about in-person events, think about partnerships, think about social media. For evaluation, like, measuring the thing that you're going to measure is the activity, right? For administration, like managing your program, having community feedback or having partner feedback, like having some sort of advisory board or activity board. Like there is this kind of backpack of activities that you can always like reach into. And obviously you're going to modify them and change them a little bit for whatever program you're doing. But kind of keep those in mind as you move forward, right? Like you're not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Like some of your key program things, you are reinventing the wheel and you're all doing some really innovative stuff. But for the outreach, for the evaluation, for the administration, like there is kind of like a standard set of things that you could kind of reach for. I think Kat is now going to put a whiteboard up and Sam is going to lead the next activity. But now that we've come up with activities that we are trying to design to get to our program outcomes, we're going to think through what are the inputs that we need to be able to make those activities happen. And yeah, so I think that's what this slide is. So we're going to do a quick activity where we brainstorm what major categories of inputs we think we can reach for to make our activities happen. Tracy, if you want to send me and or all of us some lobster, happily receive it as well.
All right.
And then and I'll hand it off to Sam. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, let's bring up that slide, Kat. That's great. Are we going to go do whiteboard first? Whichever one, it doesn't matter. So yeah, now we're finally at inputs and resources. And we're going to, that's the quick definition that we have in our logic model right there. Inputs are what is needed to create the project, implement its activities, and attain the desired outputs and outcomes. And so, and I want us, as we go into the whiteboard here, and what we're going to do is we're going to just, as we do with whiteboards, put the sticky notes on there and think about the types of things that make up inputs or resources. And I'm going to ask Nels, if he would, while people are doing this, if you would just organize similar ideas into places. And you can just put what types of inputs and resources are needed to implement the activities listed in a logic model. And think about all the different examples you used today when you were talking about your to-do list. What types of things are needed? I've never seen all the people jumping around like this before on the whiteboard.
It's like the most stressful game of Pong ever.
Yeah,
Distracting
I'm
them,
not.
I can't actually.
Nels, I can, if you'd like to participate, I can move the things into categories.
Well, I'm not sure what I even know I'm seeing.
I think
I
think you're automatically following Kat's screen. That's what happened to me.
Yeah, hit stop if it says following Kat's thing.
I've stopped. But I only see the names going around, but not the stickies.
You don't see any stickies? I only see a few stickies.
Only a few stickies.
Yeah, I can't.
You might
busy.
you might need to drag the screen around. There's
or
a tracking bar that you can move up and down or
Make
left
it
to
wider,
right.
you mean?
Whatever.
I
The
can
screen.
try to.
You can just to sorry, I know we're having some technical difficulties, but just to prompt y'all a little more, if we're running a training program, what might we need? If we're running something like Nels's organization where we're trying to engage a lot of people and we want them to meet together in one place to have a conversation, what might we need? If we're running a farmer's market or we have a booth at a farmer's market, what might we need? If we're building out new infrastructure like oh my gosh, I can't remember the word I'm looking for, like freezer, dockside freezing, an ice house at the dock, what might we need to get that approved by the city?
If you all are having trouble seeing some of the Post-its, you can reduce the screen size in the lower right-hand corner. If it's at 100% or 75%, you could reduce it to 50%. At 50%, I can see most of your responses.
Yeah.
Sam was like, yeah,
So
because he'll never figure that out.
I figured it out. I'm at
Sure you
75%,
do.
man. Okay, so people can keep putting stuff up there, but what are the types of things anything that surprises you or that you didn't think about that's up there? I mean, obviously money buys a lot of these things. What are you seeing? Broad categories. That's not
Oh, I
just
like the
money.
one that somebody put virtual engagement tracking tools because I feel like a lot of times the things that you want to evaluate, you need to like specifically get data on that. You can't just assume that after you finish, you'll be able to analyze. You need to think about the evaluation before and make sure you have the necessary stuff to do it.
Yeah. So tools, any kind of tools, right? I mean, that's one type. And if you're doing, helping with beautify parks or schoolyards, the tools might be shovels, right? Or rakes. What else is up there? Permits. I like, and this is what Sol was kind of talking about. Often you need approvals, right? You can have the best idea in the world if you can't get the permits.
Right.
Right. We just found out that we need a reseller permit for a nautical training program that's like a part of our nonprofit branch. And like we just found that out. It's been in operation for 3 years. We just found that out last week. And so it is interesting.
Sometimes better
So
not to
there's
ask.
Mine was the
Sometimes.
same. I needed a Seattle recycler license that I only found out about 4 years after I was doing it.
Yeah. Uh,
So capacity, knowledge, support, right? Somebody put time up there, right? I
Yeah.
saw time somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, money is, and one of the interesting things about going through this exercise is that money can buy most of it, right? In the form of time or a tool or whatever. But by going through this exercise, you can also begin to think about how might I get some of this stuff in kind? Who has space? Right? Like we can always rent a space, but we can also always think about what space somebody might have that would be willing to let you use it. And one of the things that we often don't do then is to build that in-kind space. I'm getting ahead of myself, but build that in-kind space into your budget and then say, yeah, I've already raised that money. So we're going to leave this and we're going to go to the next slide because we want you to jump into your own work very quickly. But this is going to be our list of things that we see, right? And you had all of these things in there. Mostly, I'm not anything that's in there that wasn't on the list.
I would say just administrative support, not specifically, but elements of it were covered with some staffing and volunteers.
Did anybody put program participants? I mean, so that is true, right? You can't do the activities sometimes without the participants. Which then leads to an outreach activity, which then leads to how many participants go through, blah, 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 right? All those things. But this is the kind of stuff that you probably very well versed in and that we get to. And what we tried to do, and I think you did a very nice job, and is to be a little bit more specific about exactly what it is that you need. If you know what curriculum you need, that's great. We need the licenses too, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you have your hand up, I see.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so with the curricula, okay, so let's say you guys, this is like specifically for you guys. I think a concrete example makes it easier. So like the self-guided thing that we do. Obviously that took a lot of resources to prepare because it's really like cool and not just like a lame thing. So in every grant that you guys apply for, do you try to like cover the cost of that? Or once it has been paid for, then is it kind of like a free asset for
That's a
everything
great
moving
question.
forward?
We're not going to answer that question today. That's in the budgeting part of things.
Okay.
But what we do is put that curriculum in the resources or inputs part of the logic model because it still exists
Okay,
as,
so it's
as a
an
need
input for everything, but then you deal with my question in the budgeting
in the
section.
budgeting, right? And I would put it in the budget, and then the question becomes whether you include that as part of your request or whether you include it as money already raised. And there's reasons to do both of those things at
Okay,
different
yep.
times. But that is part of what developing this inputs and resources thing list does for you, is it enables you to say, oh yeah, we have that. And rather than leaving it out of the budget, you put it in the budget and show that this funder's part is this big, not this big, right? As big as it is, right? Which, how much you've raised already is an important piece of things. And Sol just wrote, a quick note is that expertise is also an input, community expertise that you harness, right? Community knowledge of things. And so again, where we're headed very quickly, and thank you for that question, is that we're heading towards this part where this all becomes very practical for you, right? And if any of you are like, when's this ever going to help me write a grant? We're getting to this very quickly because, and I was just working with Alfredo a little bit, and he has an outline for his grant that he's going to be working on in the next few weeks, and it's kind of there, and he doesn't have to make it all up now. It's there and in his hip pocket. All right, so we're going to do an activity now that is very similar, or it's almost exactly the same as the activity that you just did with your activities. But before we go into it, any more questions about inputs and resources?
Sam, how specific should we be about the resources we're listing?
Yeah, there you go. Someone give me an answer to that question. What do you think? How specific should you be?
As specific as possible.
Yeah, as specific as possible is good. And knowing that, you only have so much space. But if you know that $20,000 is what the curriculum is going to cost you, write it down, right? If you know that you need, that United Methodist Church, conference room, well, then you can write that. So, yeah.
And
All right, so we're going
the reason we want to be specific is because that just gives us that reference point when applying for a grant. Like we just have that list basically. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because we want you to develop, and this is again getting ahead of ourselves, but I want you to just go through when you're developing your budget. I want you to go through that input list and just be able to easily develop your budget from this. right? No longer is the budget like, oh, now I got to develop the budget. You've developed it by doing the logic model and you put numbers. And the worst that has to happen is you have to go to HR and ask what certain people make or whatever. But you've basically written your budget by this point. Okay, or at least outlined it. So same thing, we're going to spend a little bit less time this time. So just kind of begin to develop your own in pairs, and you can figure out what's best for you to split the time and how to work together in the pairs. But we want you to begin to develop your input and resources list for your logic model and project that you're working on. All right, and Kat's gonna bump you into rooms and we'll see you right around 4:50, 15 minutes or so. Welcome back.
We've been
So
zapped.
what do you,
Yeah,
you're
I had
zapped.
a
Okay, here we go.
follow-up comment or question, but okay.
Tell me what you noticed about this picture.
There's more people on the right side.
It's
Make
about
it bigger.
Not
who's in
everyone
the
is
boat.
smiling.
It looks
Aaron
like it's gonna
has-
tip over.
Aaron has a really fun haircut.
Yeah, Aaron's in the boat.
Oh my
Where's
gosh.
Aaron?
Wow. He's back
Oh,
right.
right there.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow. How old were you there, Aaron?
God, you look like a little.
I was going to say one person has a green life
gotta make it
jacket and the
larger.
rest are
Say,
red.
One person is super cool.
I'd
Yes,
say only
Edwin.
2 people were
That must be
smiling.
Aaron.
Yes,
That's such a cool
I
guy.
was going to say that too, Margaret. Only 2 people are smiling in the back.
Oh, yeah.
And this is Aaron smiling because he thinks that his wife is about to go overboard.
No.
She was my wife
It's not
then,
because
so
of the vest.
That was yeah.
maybe that's where I
He
got my
was courting
best
her at this
version.
point. All right.
Could be.
That was a little picture from the old days when Aaron and I were running a youth program. So yeah. Okay, how was that for everybody? Everybody, any comments, concerns, questions that arise from that?
I guess my question comment is in the past when I've done this kind of thing, and I haven't had much experience with grants, only a couple in my whole career, it does feel like you're, pulling out all the stops. You're adding so much to the list to almost as if you're justifying it. And as a grant reviewer, is that what they're seeing, or are they saying, wow, this is really thought through?
I think it can be both, right? That's a sliding, a spectrum, and you have to be the judge of that. And I think you have to be aware of what you really need. And sometimes you can ask for things that would be nice in a grant, and sometimes you can't. And sometimes you ask for things that would be really nice, and then they give you $10,000 or $50,000 less than you asked for, and then you have to cut those things out, right? So the point of doing this exercise is to kind of have that in your head and have that scale in your head, because it's also okay if they cut out $50,000, say, I can't do it for that, right? I mean, depending on what your organizational position is. And so, this whole process is to make it not that you have to live by this plan that you've created exactly, but it's to give you your framework based on your best thinking of what you would love to do to solve the problem that you've committed yourself to, and then to invite others into that vision and even allow them sometimes to change it at times based on a negotiation, but at least your center. And that's that is the framework we're trying to get you to live with here, so that when you do make changes, you're very aware of the changes you're making. You're not just being dragged in because of the lure of money or the lure of whatever it is.
And the other thing that I noticed or have been thinking about is that there can be an input that's used multiple times. So like the board director's time can be used for, legislative relations. It can be used for and so it's worth it to articulate it in associated with the activity, not just say we need 50% of the board chair's time, right?
Correct. And by the way, for those of you who struggle with getting your board to be more active, showing them your logic model and showing them exactly how their help helps you achieve this is a point of negotiation, which we're going to get into in the strategic budgeting model, right? I mean, you can say this, your help here leads to this activity, leads to this output and this outcome. And if you don't do it, who's going to do it? I don't know who's going to do it, right? So this is part of what we're heading to. These are all the insights we're hoping you're getting right now. All right. So as we told you, this is becoming very practical, and your next several sessions, one is going to be on work plans, which is going into your activities list, right? And really going into more detail about those activities and figuring out who, how, when, and where. And then after that, we jump into some budgeting to create your program budgets. And then after that, and we can show this slide if you don't mind, Kat. And then after that, we have an optional session, which is strategic organizational budgeting. We call it our Budget Ninja, which goes into a lot of what I was just talking about, is using this logic model and your organizational budget to reach out to and to really engage people in what you're doing, both in terms of asking for help or, getting them involved in some way or another. So the 23rd is an optional session. It's 2.5 hours. And we're going to introduce a pretty complex spreadsheet that you can use to really integrate your fundraising plan with your budget. And we'd love to have your EDs involved in that if you can, if you're not the ED, to kind of introduce this to them. And in order to really benefit from those sessions the most, you should have your logic model finished so that we can create your program budget from that, and your program budget will then feed into one part of the organizational budget. So that's kind of previewing the next couple weeks. And it really is going to now come to, wow, we can rate grants. This is great. I'm going to hand it back over to Sol.
I'm sorry, one quick question. We can also have our budget person or our finance person join on the 23rd?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
We'll send out
invite will go out shortly.
Some details about that you can share with the appropriate person if it's not you. The survey,
okay, so
the survey link is in the chat. You guys probably saw that. Sorry.
No, yeah. So just to close, please fill out the survey that's in the chat. I think Aaron just sent out the link, and just some takeaways to think about moving on from this session. As you're thinking about activities, make sure that you're including not just the core programmatic activities that you're designing, but also all the support activities, outreach, evaluation, administration, that will allow you to get your core activities where they need to be and fit into a broader program design or grant. Think about, and then as you're thinking about the inputs you need for those activities, think through these major categories of staffing, space, technology and supply, software, consultants, program participants, community expertise, curricula, if you're doing a training program, permits, licenses, equipment, administrative support. Think specifically, how much of what type of person's time do I need to get this activity done the way I need it done? And as we're starting to get through the details of activities and inputs, that'll really set you up to design a program budget and to design a work plan where you can get a lot more granular. I think some of the questions earlier on in the session, how granular do you need to be? You'll get really detailed in these next couple sessions coming up. Thank you all for participating today. Hope you keep thinking about the milestones, staffing, and timelines that could be associated with the activities list, and thinking about, what dollar amounts might be associated with your inputs. And please complete the post-lesson survey before leaving the Zoom, and we'll see you next week.
Tomorrow or
Oh,
Wednesday.
yeah.
Oh, Wednesday. Sorry. I don't know what day it is.